Good evening. My name is Suzanne Kavik, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Newcastle. I'd like to welcome you and our candidates to our candidates forum for the Newcastle Town Supervisor and Town Board 2-year term positions. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots political organization of both women and men. This means that the League does not support or oppose one candidate or political party over another. We are dedicated to the active and informed participation of citizens in government at all levels. The League works to educate voters, increase understanding and debate on major policy issues, and influence policy through education and advocacy. The League takes positions on policies, not candidates or parties. You can find more information about the League at our website, lwvnewcastle.org, where you will also be able to access information on all of tonight's candidates through our online voters guide. I want to remind everyone that early voting is from October 23rd to the 31st. Please check your polling place, as it may have changed since the initial postcards were mailed from the Board of Elections. Specifically, elementary schools will once again be used as sites. So if you have voted in the past at an elementary school, please do check to see if that will be your polling site again this time around. I also want to let you know that the Newcastle League is once again teamed up with Pat Yost of Babe's Delectables to offer you a delicious selection of Thanksgiving pies and cheesecakes for your holiday table. So please go to our website or Facebook page for more details. The orders must be placed by November 16th. This evening's proceedings are being taped by the Newcastle Community Media Center and are being live streamed on YouTube, where closed captioning is available. The video will be available on demand at both nccmc.com and YouTube. All other recording is strictly prohibited. Any rebroadcast of this candidates forum must be in its entirety and unedited. As for the primary this past June, we received an impressive number of questions for the candidates. So I'd like to again emphasize that if you don't hear your question verbatim, it does not mean that it is not being asked. Questions were grouped and combined for redundancy. Our goal is for you, the community, to learn as much as possible in our brief time together in this forum about where the candidates stand on the issues that are important to you. We have attempted to cover as many of the topics identified by the community as possible, and we'll get through as many as time allows. So for this evening, our timekeeper is League member Mary Kirsch, and our moderator is Alice McNamara, a member of the New Rochelle League of Women Voters. Alice will now go over the ground rules for tonight's forum.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's my pleasure to be here, and I want to reiterate that in accordance with League of Women Voters policy and practice, I am not a voter in this election. And the ground rules have been agreed to by the candidates ahead of time. The order of opening statements has been determined by lots that were drawn during a previous session. The order of closing statements will be in the reverse order as the opening statements. The order in which the candidates will respond to further questions will be rotated to assure fairness. Throughout the forum, no comments of a personal or abusive nature will be allowed. I will rule such comments out of order. Each candidate has up to 1 minute for their opening statement. They will then answer a question, and they will have 1.5 minutes to answer each of the questions. The timekeeper will indicate when 1 minute remains and when 30 seconds remains in the allowed speaking time, and again, when time is up. Thank you, Mary. Each candidate is allowed 2 30-second rebuttals. Questions from the audience were submitted prior to candidates' night by email and electronic form. The audience will not be able to submit questions during this event. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will give a closing statement of a maximum of 1 minute. As moderator, I will reserve the right to allow rebuttal of the close if warranted by the content of a closing statement. And that rebuttal will also be 30 seconds. We will begin with the candidates for the town supervisor position. Today, we have 2 candidates for the position of town supervisor. Alphabetically, your candidates are Lisa Katz and Holly McCall. In accordance with the lots that were drawn previously, Lisa Katz will deliver the first opening statement. Oh, Lisa, I'm not hearing you. I think you're muted.
Better?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
And Mary will start the time.
Okay.
Go ahead, thank you.
Good evening, and thank you to the League for organizing this event. The other day, my son asked me why, after 8 years on the town board, I want to be supervisor. And my answer was simple. I love our town. I'm proud of the positive changes I've made, like saving Chapac and bringing in the Westchester Broadway Theater, tripling our paving budget, adopting green initiatives, advocating for diversity and inclusion, and striving to keep property taxes flat. It would be easy to just walk away, but I can't. I love our community too much. And the proposed form-based code is a fundamentally flawed development plan that will forever change our town. I am for smart revitalization that genuinely serves our community without surrendering it to for-profit developers. Of course, the FBC is not the only issue facing our town, and I'll address them all with kindness and respect because our community deserves nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCall? You're also muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much to the League for hosting this forum. And to the voters, I'm so proud to be your Democratic candidate for town supervisor. I come from a family that values service over self and giving back to the community. And whether it's been leading a nationwide effort to ensure stay-home parents have access to credit, or serving as a member of the Board of Education, making sure that our schools were open during the pandemic, or just running the Bell Craft Fair for the PTA. Big or small, I take my commitment to service seriously. I value teamwork, collaboration, and hard work, and I respect the same in others. And despite what you're hearing, the election is not about one block, one hamlet, or one issue. This is about Chappaqua, Millwood, the West End, and all of Newcastle. This is about the future of Newcastle and who has the skills and temperament to move Newcastle forward. And I look forward to hearing your questions tonight and sharing my vision with you.
Okay, thank you. The first question will go first to Ms. McCall. What qualifications make you a strong candidate for town supervisor? What personal qualities will you bring to the table if elected that will benefit our town? Ms. McCall.
Yes, thank you, sorry. I look at the supervisor role as one of being the chairman of the town board, the town executive, and setting the strategic policy and direction for the town. But what I think is really most important is being the chief collaborator, and the experience and personal skills that I have that are really valuable to excel in that role are the experience that I have of serving on boards in the past, such as the Board of Education, my previous experience as a project manager and a process manager of, frankly, just getting stuff done. I mentioned in my opening that I led a nationwide campaign to ensure that stay-home parents have access to credit. It's no small feat to be able to rally 50,000 signatures and get the attention of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and two bipartisan members of the Congressional Financial Services Committee, and actually make a rule change that protected stay-home parents' right to credit. So I think that I have an awful lot of qualities and experience and skills to play the role of chief collaborator.
Thank you. Ms. Katz?
Can you just repeat the question again?
Sure. I know it's a long question. What qualifications make you a strong candidate for town supervisor? What personal qualities will you bring to the table if elected that will benefit our town?
Okay, thank you. So I guess they say if you want something done right, give it to a busy woman. And that is certainly what I am. And it has been my absolute privilege to serve on the town board for the past 8 years and to represent the residents of this community, whether you stand on the red side of the table or the blue or the polka dot side. I will listen to everyone. And I think that collaboration is incredibly important because while the supervisor does serve as the chief executive of the town, we also need to make sure that we're representing our residents. And as supervisor, it's my duty to respectfully listen to residents and their concerns, even if I don't like what they have to say. I've always done this. In fact, when I first took office 8 years ago, we did away with the 3-minute timer on resident input. And to me, if residents have something to say, they should have the time to say it, whatever it may be. I will set the tone at the top to make sure that everyone in town feels safe speaking their minds and that their thoughts are not only encouraged but valued. And I've done this for the past 8 years, and I look forward to doing it for the next 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question, Ms. Katz will be the first to answer. It's exciting to have so many new residents in town. What do you think makes our town attractive to potential home buyers, and how will you work to enhance that?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a great question. When I first moved here and when we were first looking for places, one of the things I was initially looking for was obviously I wanted a great school system and I wanted a town with beautiful natural beauty and incredible parks and recreation facilities. And I think that most important, it's the community of people that make this so special. We are people who love where we live. And that is really, I think, what ultimately draws people here. I was talking to people at the Ragamuffin Parade this weekend who were just scouting towns, and they said the feeling they got when they walked into Newcastle was exactly what they were looking for. That being said, I think that there's a lot we can do. One of the things I would like to do is actually increase our recreation budget so that we can continue to provide great and even additional programming to everyone from all different diverse perspectives in town, and to make sure that we are valuing every individual, whether depending on what religion you are, what background you are. We are just such a welcoming community, and I'd like to continue to make sure that we enhance that so that we all feel welcome in our town. Other things that attract us too, I started the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center. We're bringing the Westchester Broadway Theater here. That's another great amenity for our town and another reason that our residents will be so happy.
Thank you. Ms. McCall?
Yes, thank you for that question. On Community Day, I had an opportunity to talk to so many new residents, and I heard them echo a lot of things that I had found attractive about the town and had made it welcoming and exciting for my family when we came here as well. But I definitely see things that would make it even more welcoming and exciting to new families. And I hear them echo some of those things that they'd like to see grow as well. And, a lot of people mention the school system, but more than half of our residents don't have children in the school system. So things that make that more welcoming for people could be more walkability, increasing sidewalks, loving to connect our parks and our hamlets to each other, and additional programming for our community events, especially our celebrating diversity types of activities and continuing to improve our Committee on Race and Equity. Additional arts and culture activities. I'd like to see some more of those events brought into our downtown. I do love the Chat Pack, and I'm so glad for that's existence and the work that's been done. But I think that we can grow that throughout our community. And I'd love to see even more inclusive activities, not just with diversity, but also the special needs community, and continuing to expand the accessibility for all of our residents.
Okay, thank you. The next question will go first to Ms. McCall. Civility and relationships are important. How will you work to maintain and rebuild relationships with your constituents, all residents and key stakeholders, even when they may disagree with your views?
That's such an excellent question. I have a very calm and collaborative approach to everything that I do. It's something that's very important to me. And I would tend to agree that things have gotten a little bit heated within our community. And one of the things I've actually been the most disappointed about is when I've seen two of our largest municipal organizations, this Chappaqua School District and the town, really not getting along. And having been on the school board and now seeking town office, this is something that really strikes me as an opportunity and something that I would like to work on. And so I see, first of all, we need to stop working through proxies. We need to start just having some face-to-face conversations. We need to set the tone, focus on collaboration, rebuild the trust, talk to each other when we don't have a hot button issue more often, increase the lines of communication, open up more forums where we're speaking to each other about things that aren't tense, as well as some of these conversations that there's a little bit more controversy and disagreement about. I think it's about more communication and more transparency and openness.
Thank you. Ms. Katz?
So I do talk to residents everywhere I go, much to the chagrin of my children who think we're going for a quick errand somewhere and 2 hours later, we're finally leaving because I've been speaking to residents about anything that matters to them. So I do think it's very important to keep those lines of communication open. And when I first took office, we actually repaired our relationship with the Chappaqua Central School District. These two entities, we are not adversaries. Combined, we're what make our town so wonderful. And I'm looking to foster that relationship again. And that's one reason I actually brought Vicki Tipp onto the Unite Newcastle slate, because as the past president 3 times of the school board, she really will help to foster that relationship. One other thing I love is that because I'm running on the independent Unite Newcastle line, and I've done that the last 2 times that I was elected, again, I believe that we're all Newcastlers, and I have and will continue to represent every single person to the best of my ability. I have no political resume to build, no party machine to please, and no ego in need of stroking. It's just me and my love of the community and a commitment to address all issues throughout Newcastle in a reasoned, practical, and fiscally responsible manner to serve the best interests of our town altogether. Thanks.
Okay, the fourth question will be answered first by Ms. Katz. How can local governments help to address the climate crisis? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has raised the alarm and issued guidance for policymakers. How would you ensure that the town of Newcastle does its part?
So that's a great question. And thankfully, and I feel somewhat a part of it, Unite Newcastle has been on the forefront of so many green initiatives. We won a coveted spot with Solarize Newcastle to provide solar at discounted prices to residents and businesses. We were the first municipality in New York State to pass a comprehensive bag law. We started putting a composting program at the recycling center to avoid putting usable compost into waste. We became the first community in New York State to default to all green electricity supply, and the vast majority of our residents and businesses have adopted that. We converted nearly all our street lights to LED lights. We passed a resolution to work toward the goals of the Paris Accord. We just recently passed a leaf blower law, and we also bought an electric van to shuttle between Chapac and the Chappaqua Hamlet. We're also now considering an environmental stretch code that would allow for more environmental building requirements. And I think that as things arise, we need to make sure that we take advantage of that. We're putting in more EV charging stations. So I think we have to constantly be looking and working with our Sustainability Advisory Board and working with our residents to find ways that we can really help our environment. Another way to do that also is by looking at our airport issue. Thank you.
Ms. McCall?
This is somewhere that I feel really passionate about, and I think that it's actually time for us to step up our urgency when it comes to the environment. Recently, we had a storm come through, and so many of the businesses in our hamlet were flooded. And it was kind of a wake-up call after a lot of work that we did to try to mitigate the stormwater issues. We still saw so many of our merchants struggling with flooding. So the climate emergency is here, and yes, we have done a lot of work, but I think that there's a lot more that we need to do. I know that we're already on our way to the Climate Smart Community Silver certification, but I think we need to keep acting even more aggressively there. We need to continue our work on the clean energy community certifications. I'd like to see us electrify our town fleet and all of the equipment and act aggressively in that space as well. I'd like to focus our development that we're encouraging on concrete in the asphalt areas where we're already there, and preserve our green spaces more aggressively. Explore ways that we can fund ways to purchase those green spaces and preserve them and conserve. And I'm actually really proud to say that I do have the endorsement of the New York League of Conservation Voters for my positions on the environmental protection.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be first to Ms. McCall. Do you believe the impact of the Westchester County Airport is an important one for Newcastle residents? If so, why or why not? And how do you propose to help address this issue if elected?
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. So I live, I think, in the landing path. So I, on occasion, think that I could probably wave to the passengers and the pilots, unfortunately. So I do personally live with this, and I think this is probably something that we all agree on, that we need to be really strong advocates for our community, and we need to collaborate with our neighboring communities to advocate for an alternative landing approach. We can't do this on our own. This is something we need to be working with our neighbors. We need to all be on the same page and advocate together with our county and federal partners, such as George Latimer and our Representative Mondaire Jones and our Senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand. And I'm actually really proud also to say that those are folks who have all endorsed me. And these are relationships that are very, very strong for me. So I think we're in a really good position as well to start that advocation and let me advocate with them to preserve our quality of life and hopefully reduce the impacts that we're facing in Newcastle as a result of the airport noise and pollution.
Ms. Katz.
Thank you. So I actually have realistic things that we need to do, because the Westchester County Airport is impacting our environment and the peaceful enjoyment of many of our residents' properties, yes, including mine as well. Yes, we must support the new flight path over 684. In fact, I'm the town board member who is working with our airport advisory board. And I know that the FAA and the county spoke privately recently about this new flight path, which should have been in a public forum. The Westchester Aviation Association is actually supportive of this, and I'm hoping that there will be a presentation about it in the coming months, and I will be there, as I have been for the last number of years, fighting for our residents with the airport. Specifically, we need to maintain an ongoing presence on the Airport Advisory Board to make sure we are up to date on all developments that might impact us. When multiple leases were signed several years ago that increased private operations at the airport, surrounding communities were not given notice, and that's not okay. We have to actively participate in the upcoming airport master plan process and make sure concerned residents are aware of opportunities to voice concerns. As town supervisor, I will make sure that I am there to voice my concerns personally and that we allocate the necessary resources to do this. Almost 90% of the current operations at the airport are private. These aren't the flights we take to go to Disney. These planes enact an unacceptable environmental toll on our region, and they need to be stopped.
The next question, first to Ms. Katz. Residents of Millwood and the West End often feel forgotten about. If elected, how would you make sure the needs of these residents are addressed and that they feel an important part of the Newcastle community?
So that's a great question, and I'm proud that I'm the town board member who oversees the Millwood West End Advisory Board. And I do not think they should be given a second thought by our town government. And in fact, since I took office, I helped to secure $500,000 for Millwood sidewalks, as well as a grant for Millwood park improvements, increased our beautification advisory budget, which was able to bring planters all along Station Road. I implemented $3,000 grant for new plantings in Millwood, work to make the Millwood Community Garden a reality, work to bring in DeChico's. We're also bringing sidewalks to Millwood, and we've started movies in Millwood, as well as many other things. But one thing that actually separates Millwood, and especially the West End, from, let's say, the Chappaqua Hamlet, is that the West End is much more environmentally sensitive, and that area needs to be protected by our town board from development. It's home to our beautiful parks like Sunny Ridge and it's filled with ecological beauty. And as supervisor, I will protect this area of town from development. I'm also going to delve very deeply into the issues with the Hudson Ridge Wellness Center, make sure I'm on top of that proposal to ensure traffic won't adversely impact our roads and that development cannot occur on the Newcastle parcel, as well as the Sunshine Home. That the environmental impacts there remain, and we need to hold the developers to task for testing, and we need to have greater oversight over the project.
Ms. McCall?
So I actually largely agree with what Lisa just said. The West End, it does have some very unique features, and we do need to protect the biodiversity and the sensitive watersheds out there. And I absolutely agree. All of our community needs to feel connected and as part of our community. I do think that there are some parts of the Chappaqua and part of the Chappaqua area that maybe don't think about the Millwood and West End area as part of Newcastle. And I would like to see us make sure that we are all acting as one community as well. I think about things like when we're connecting with walkways and sidewalks and improving bikeability between the areas. I think that's a wonderful way to make sure that we feel connected as a community. I'd love to see a community day be something that brings in more of our Millwood and West End folks and doesn't feel quite as Chappaqua centric. And making sure that in addition to expanding amenities and making sure that we're protecting the issues that are appropriate on the West End, but that we're also making sure that the community is also focused as one Newcastle.
Okay, the next question will go first to Ms. McCall. An important issue for many Newcastle voters is the form-based code. Can you tell us what your current position is on the form-based code and how and why it may have changed over time? How and why your opinion may have changed over time?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Okay. An important issue for many Newcastle voters is the form-based code. Can you tell us what your current position is on the form-based code and how and why your position may have changed over time.
So my position on the form-based code, I am supportive of the direction that the town board is currently taking. I appreciate that this is a area of Newcastle, or of the Chappaqua Hamlet, which is a small area. It's less than 8 acres. It is the area of town which actually needs revitalization the most on the North Greeley corridor. And it is, and they have been listening and reducing the size of the buildings to under 5 stories with a 3 or 4 story max. That's consistent with what I have always felt. I think there have been some impressions that I was opposed to the form-based code, and I've never actually felt an opposition. I had some concerns, and I'm very pleased that the town board has been listening and reacting and being very responsive to the feedback that the community has been making. So I am supportive of the direction that the town board is taking and appreciative for the feedback that they have received and acted on.
Okay, Ms. Katz.
So unlike my opposing candidate, I have not changed my mind. I got information about the form-based code, and once I did, I recognize that it is not what our town needs. It does not accomplish the stated goals in the comprehensive plan of bringing vitality to the Chappaqua Hamlet and a diversity of economic and social options like entertainment, restaurants, things to do, and housing diversity for underserved populations. It is not giving us a reason to stay in town. What we need to do is do actual planning and collaboration and develop a plan that accomplishes those goals, where we will bring all of those things to town without worrying about destroying our schools, increasing our taxes, having traffic parking, significant issues that have all been addressed. Now, the form-based code also is not limited to the 7 acres on North Greeley. The study area is 72 acres, the entire Chappaqua Hamlet. That can be adopted after one public meeting by any town board. And do we really want to put the future of our hamlet in the hands of for-profit developers instead of doing the hard work and telling them build this for us instead of build whatever you want?
Okay. Okay, you're requesting a rebuttal?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just for the timekeeper in the audience to know, Holly McCall has requested her first 30-second rebuttal. Okay, go ahead.
So I just wanted to address the statement that this is putting everything in the hands of the developers. Any action that's going to happen or any development that's going to be happening is at the hands of a property owner. And a developer can't come in and just determine that they want to take over the town. A property owner has to take an action. And if they engage with a developer, that's between the property owner and that particular developer. That's not between the developer and the town.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Katz, you're requesting a rebuttal, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just again, for the audience to know that Ms. Katz is requesting and is being granted her first 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
With all due respect to Ms. McCall, over 60% of the property in the form-based code study area is municipal that we have 100% control over. And if we cede that control to developers, they can develop whatever they want as long as they check a few boxes in this code. Instead, we can actually do planning, bring a target and a target, lowercase t, like Jacob Burns, for instance, in Pleasantville, that brings people to town, that then brings restaurants and stores. So people say, hey, I want to be in the Chappaqua Hamlet.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. McCall, you're requesting your second rebuttal, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Okay, 30-second rebuttal for Ms. McCall. Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to say that selling town land is something quite different than just simply rezoning town land. That is not something that just happens with one hearing. And I would just like to be very clear that that is also not something that I am advocating that we do.
Okay, all right. Our next question, Ms. Katz will answer the next question first. Is the form-based code the best way to accomplish revitalization and affordable housing goals? If elected, what tools would you promote to accomplish the goals in the town's comprehensive plan?
Okay, so we touched on that. Briefly. In terms of affordable housing, a form-based code is not a tool for social justice. In fact, I already proposed a 10% affordability requirement throughout the downtown Chappaqua hamlet that the remainder of the town board refused to consider and vote through. But that can certainly be accomplished without a form-based code. And in fact, by being able to negotiate with developers, they want an extra floor, we may say, okay, give us 15% affordability requirement or 20% or whatever makes sense, but it puts that negotiation in our hands. So again, I touched on it very briefly, but we need to do actual planning. The reason Pleasantville's so great is because Jacob Burns was built, and you know what? People came, and then restaurants came, and then stores came. We need a reason for people to come into downtown and stay. And just so people are aware, the form-based code as currently drafted does not require commercial and retail properties to be on North Greeley Avenue. Now, how awesome would it be if we could actually double the size of our downtown retail district by allowing retail on the ground floor, residential above, and we could make this fabulous. Instead, what we're really doing is allowing developers to make the most money because residential gives them much more money than commercial properties do in terms of rent.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. The next question will go first to Ms. McCall. How do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted?
Did Holly answer that question?
Yeah, I didn't get that last question yet.
I answered, but she did not. The last question you just asked.
Question 8. Did I not? My apologies.
It went to me first.
I told you that I was, yes, I told you that I was going to make a mistake. So thank you. Thank you for correcting me.
Thank you,
go
Lisa.
ahead, Holly, and I apologize.
Would you mind repeating the question for me?
Of course. Is the form-based code the best way to accomplish revitalization and affordable housing goals? If elected, what tools would you promote to accomplish the goals in the town's comprehensive plan?
Thank you. So I think that right now, the form-based code is our best opportunity to accomplish revitalization in a downtown hamlet. There have been years of work put into this effort and lots of time and money invested. So I think it is absolutely the best tool to apply right now. And the code is not finally drafted, so we have the best opportunity now to make changes to the portions of the number of affordability requirements and the workforce housing, which I know the town board was just discussing last night, as well as how far on North Greeley the retail on the or commercial on the first floor needs to be applied. And I think that we have every opportunity right now to define that revitalization and form it and take a look and see how well does this work out for us on North Greeley. We have a great opportunity to learn how powerful of a tool a form-based code can be for both revitalization and for affordable housing. And we owe it to our community to address the housing crisis.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Katz, you're requesting a rebuttal, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so again, for the audience and the timekeeper, Ms. Katz is requesting the second of her 2 30-second rebuttals. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So first, I want to say that our town is not a science experiment. And to not have parameters to determine success on North Greeley is absolutely ridiculous. The other thing is that, yes, we've gone through this process for 2 years. And what's great about that is we actually just had the town pay for an environmental analysis, as flawed as it may be, that developers not under a form-based code can utilize in order to do development that involves our planning board with a streamlined process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now on to the next question. And this will go first to Ms. McCall. How do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted Newcastle? Do you think we know yet the full scope of the challenges and opportunities that have resulted? If elected, how would you navigate policy decisions in light of these impacts?
Wow, that is a big question. So thank you for that. So no, I don't think that it's possible to know all of the full impacts of COVID. I know if you read the news, you know that we're still finding that there are supply chain impacts as a result of COVID. So I think it's going to be a little while before we can assess the full impacts. However, I think that there are things that we can start thinking about right now. We know that some commuting patterns have changed. So that's something that I think we need to keep monitoring. The parking lot is not filled back up to capacity. So I think that we have to take a look at that and monitor the use, and are the revenues going to come back to where they were? Do we need to change the way that we're using our parking lot? Do we need to try to recapture those revenues in a different manner? And, you know, I think also maybe some of our shopping patterns may have changed. And as we go forward and as we take a look at how we're rezoning, I think that as we go forward, these are things that we're going to have to continue to pay attention to. And I'm actually really grateful to have a scientist on my side to help keep us informed. And she's been a great asset to the town board as well, to make sure that we are following the science with mask mandates and adjusting as we need to.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Katz.
So absolutely, the impacts of COVID are not yet known. And that is 100% why we cannot rely on the environmental analysis done for this form-based code. We don't know the impact on traffic patterns. What we do know is that we have many new families here who have brought children to our school system. We don't know the impacts on parking. We don't know the impacts on bedroom count. I think a lot of people would say if they're moving into an apartment and they may need to be quarantined and work from home for an extended period of time, they don't want a 1-bedroom. So the analysis done on that is completely irrelevant. We don't know our impacts on retail. We don't know our impacts on how this is going to affect our schools and our taxes going forward. There was a big hit to our taxes. So there is so much that's yet to be known and studied that I think to implement anything as transformational as a form-based code on our town is completely premature and irresponsible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this will be the final question of this portion of tonight's forum. And Ms. Katz will answer first. Okay, how do you think, if elected, how will you help bring the community together after the divisiveness of form-based code considerations? Do you believe there are still decisions to be made that will allow all residents to feel like their voices have been heard?
Yes. And I have been doing this throughout the whole process. And I've said this I think in answer to one of the other questions, that as an elected official, it is my duty to respectfully listen to residents and all of their concerns, even if I don't agree with them. In fact, I actually prefer to hear from residents who I don't agree with, because my view is that what I think is right and what they think is right, if we come together somewhere in the middle, we can come up with an outcome that's even better than either of us contemplated. So I think that it is incredibly important to treat our residents with respect and actually seek out that input, not only from residents who are engaged and passionate about a project, whatever that may be, but from the greater community, to make sure that everyone is educated on topics and really understands the facts, and we can come together as a community to discuss rationally and respectfully without bullying any resident into having any predetermined opinion. Again, I will continue to represent every single person to the best of my ability, no matter what their beliefs are, no matter what their background is, and no matter what their political aspirations are. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. McCall?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. We need to be having regular communication. We need to be listening to everyone. I do think that there are some communication and collaboration and openness breakdowns, and I have definitely witnessed some of that myself. I have seen and talked to people who have felt uncomfortable sharing their own opinions and views because of the tone. And I don't want anyone to feel like that when I'm supervisor. I want to be the supervisor and the leader for all of the residents of Newcastle. And so I want to make sure that I'm setting a positive and collaborative tone at all meetings and making sure that everyone feels comfortable sharing their opinions. And I want everyone to know that I will be listening and considering everyone's opinions, thoughts, perspectives, and I'm willing to be there whenever someone wants to pick up the phone and give me their thoughts. I want to make sure that there are comfortable ways for people to share their thoughts through different channels. Not everybody wants to stand up at a meeting and publicly share their thoughts with everybody. So that's something that's really important to me, are multiple forums for different ways to communicate. I want to make sure that we're having regular joint meetings with our key municipal partners and having those lines of communication always open.
Okay, thank you. And now we will proceed to the candidates' 1-minute closing statements. As was agreed to in the ground rules, the closing statements will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. So Ms. McCall will deliver the first closing statement.
Okay. So again, thank you to the league, to the viewers, the voters. So tonight, I think you've heard quite a bit about my positions. I do think that some were misrepresented when it comes to the form-based code. Again, I support the direction that the town board's been taking, and I do believe that feedback has been incorporated. I support that there's no more than 3 to 4 stories, that is less than 8 acres that it's going to be applied to. And I think that that's a very important point. And it's the area that needs revitalization most. I really can't wait to see what new restaurant or cool shop's going to open where the old vacant Rite Aid is. And I can picture it, this vision, our vision of a more thriving hamlet in Newcastle. Please vote for me on row A on November 2nd. Good night.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Katz?
So thank you everyone for listening tonight. Like most of you, I didn't move here for the nightlife, but I did move here for our town's incredible schools, natural beauty, and community spirit. My experience serving on the town board with integrity, thoughtfulness, and heart has given me an in-depth perspective on the challenges and opportunities faced by our community. I am the only candidate with the experience and commitment to lead Newcastle forward. My Unite Newcastle running mates and I are committed to fostering productive relationships and open lines of communication with our residents, merchants, Board of Education, and other key constituencies in our town. I promise that as supervisor, I will collaborate with you, listen to you, and work incredibly hard for all of you, no matter your political affiliation. This is our town, our voice, and our future. Let's make sure to get it right. So remember to vote the last line on the ballot to keep Newcastle first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the candidates. We will now proceed with the two candidates for town board, two candidates running for one position for a 2-year term on the town board. The ground rules remains for this portion of the evening's forum are the same as for the first portion of the forum. The two candidates who are running for this position are Jennifer Bounds and Victoria Tipp. Victoria Tipp will deliver the first opening statement, and then we will rotate as we did with the previous portion. And we'll just wait until both candidates are okay. Okay, so Ms. Tipp, go ahead.
Okay.
Your 1-minute opening statement.
Yes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the League for this evening. My husband and I have lived in Newcastle for 21 years, and we've raised 4 children here. And we came for the excellent schools, the natural beauty and open spaces, and the caring neighbors. And we love this town. And now that our kids are grown, we want to stay. I believe in public service, and I've served this community in many capacities over 20 years. I'm a 10-year trustee and 3-time president of the Board of Ed, and past president and advocacy chair of the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association. I've been PTA president on the board of this League of Women Voters, and I'd be so honored to expand my service to the Newcastle Town Board. I want to promote good governance, transparency, and an inclusive approach where diverse voices are actively sought, welcomed, and respected. And yes, we can revitalize our town, bring diverse housing options through smart, sustainable development that maintains the hamlets, natural beauty, and leaves us in control of our future.
Okay, Ms. Bounds. Are you muted?
Thank you to the League for hosting tonight, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. I'd also like to thank the voters of Newcastle for making me your Democratic candidate for the unexpired term for town board. In my professional life, I work in business operations, which is a shorthand way of saying I get things done. As a Newcastle resident, I've done the same. On the Business and Commerce Committee for the Council for Race and Equity, I've led the effort to bring diverse vendors to the farmers market. I've served on the Greeley Youth and Greeley Lacrosse boards. And recently, I spearheaded the effort to rename a park after Jean Craighead George, which went from concept to dedication in less than 6 months. There are many difficult issues facing Newcastle, and I look forward to discussing them tonight and digging in and doing the work on the town board. And we're going to do it like we did throughout the campaign by continuing to collaborate with our elected officials up and down the county that we've been so fortunate to work with and proud to be endorsed by. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first question, and again, the candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each of the questions. First question will go first to Ms. Bounds. What qualifications make you a strong candidate for town board? What personal qualities will you bring to the table if elected that will benefit our town?
Well, I'm a big advocate of collaboration. In the effort to rename the park for Jean Craighead George, we worked with the Conservation Board, her family, the library, the book festival, and a lot of organizations to break down silos and really create a memorial that was a tribute to her. And it's one of the first parks that get dedicated to a woman. It doesn't happen very often. And the same thing on the Council for Race and Equity. We had people with a bunch of different backgrounds, and we threw up a bunch of different projects to do something really good for the town. So I think that that's what I do in my professional life, and that's what I do in my volunteer life. I break big projects down into chunks that are manageable, hand them off to people so that they can own them. And then we move forward and we come up with a great collaborative experience. And I look forward to doing that in a more official capacity on the town board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Tip?
Yes, thank you. I've been engaged in extensive public service in this community for 20 years. Again, as I said, through the Board of Ed for 10 years, and as 3 times president of our school board, as a 3-year president and 8-year trustee of the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, as PTA president and many PTA committees and the League of Women Voters, and also the Chappaqua Orchestra Board and some soccer team assistant manager positions. I've had extensive advocacy experience as advocacy chair of the School Boards Association and on the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, representing 77 school districts in 4 counties, working on issues of equity in school funding. I've lobbied our state legislators in Albany. I've organized legislative forums and used web-based tools to amplify community voice. And I can apply this experience to serve our community and our town. I've represented school residents and worked with so many stakeholders, parents of school children, empty nesters, and seniors. And I've learned the importance of collaboration with individuals, organizations, and institutions. And that's how we make progress and reach best outcomes. With my legal background, I can easily digest legal documents and understand implications of government action. I have mediation experience that helps me bridge diverse views and engage in constructive dialogue. I'm a collaborator, I'm a listener, and I want to keep learning. I love meeting and talking to people, and I will immediately foster an excellent working relationship between the town and school district.
The second question will go first to Ms. Tip. What makes Newcastle a great place to live, and how will you work to enhance those qualities if elected?
Newcastle is a wonderful place to live. And in fact, my husband and I felt that the minute we came to look at the first house here. What makes it wonderful is, well, a lot of people start off with the schools, and that's usually what makes people start to look. So, and that's what we did. We looked at our school district and found that it would fit the needs of a few of our children. But beyond that, we fell in love with the beautiful town, the bucolic nature of not only the town, but so many open spaces and woodlands and sanctuaries that we love to go walking through and enjoy. I would ensure that our open spaces and woodlands and sanctuaries continue to be protected, and that we're very mindful of the sensitive ecosystems. I do want to ensure that our town remains a place where people want to be, and that it's not replaced by buildings that are set by developers in whatever way that they want to build, that is determined by a rigid code. I just want to make sure that residents have a voice in what gets built here. And ceding that control to developers will change our town forever. So serving on the school board, I never expected to come onto this race, but when I saw how the school board was being treated, how legitimate concerns were being minimized and mishandled, unfortunately, I decided that it was time to do my part on the Newcastle Town Board.
Thank you. Ms. Bounds?
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What makes Newcastle a great place to live, and how will you work to enhance those qualities if elected?
Sure. So when we first moved, we moved for the schools, and the previous owner of our house said, everyone moves for the schools, but you have to remember that there's beauty and there's magic here. And this is a special place in and of itself, and do everything you can to conserve and promote that. And so that's something that I really value. And I really feel like a lot of our town-owned spaces are overgrown and inaccessible. And if we can remove some of the vines and conserve them, we can create our carbon sinks and put them back on the pollinator pathway to really create an environment for the natural world. Another thing that I would like to see is I've met a lot of my neighbors walking to the train down Douglas Road, and I've developed some really great friendships with people who don't necessarily align with my kids in grade or with the activities that they do at school. And so I'd love to see that be a more safe path so that people can connect through cross sections of Newcastle and walk and really connect and use the nature and really get to know one another. And then, of course, we need to work on the relationship with the CCSD because there's been a lot of tension, I think, over the form-based code, and repairing those relationships are critical because schools are very important.
Okay, the next question will go first to Ms. Bounds. If elected, how will you work to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our town?
Well, we all strive to hold up the ideals of equity and to live up to the ideal that every person is connected and has value in and of themselves. And sometimes we fall short despite our best efforts. One of the first things I would like to do is fund the Council for Race and Equity as it becomes a committee. Over 100 volunteers spent more than a year to come up with 300 recommendations of how we can move towards a more perfect union and a more perfect Newcastle. And we need to work to implement those. We need to get the committee set up. We need to make it a town committee, and we need to have it funded so that we can move forward towards the goals that we all hold dear.
Ms. Chip?
Yes. Well, as the only minority and woman of color among all the candidates here, equity issues are personally, morally, and socially crucial. And I'm completely committed to improving inclusion and a sense of belonging for all individuals to create a thriving community that honors our differences. I wrote the Board of Education resolution that created our Committee on Anti-Racism, Equity, and Social Justice Committee, which I co-chair. I am committing to implementing the recommendations of the town CRE committee and ensuring that the new DEI committee has funding to support this. The CRE came out with many recommendations. I can't name them all now, but anti-racism guidebooks, newsletters, communication plans, workshops, awareness campaigns, new family outreach throughout the year. And I would also further recruit underrepresented groups to participate in town government committees and advisory boards. We need to be proactive in broadening diverse representation in local government. In terms of funding the CRE committee, I completely agree that this must be funded to take the work seriously. I know that there are funds for CRE programs, possibly in 3 budget lines of the town budget. There's boards and commissions budget lines, special projects and special event budget lines, which each have approximately $20,000. So I think the money is there. And I think we must continue programs and training in the town. There's a lot to say, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Ms. Tip will answer the next question first. Many town residents have expressed concerns about the tone of some town board actions and the apparent disintegration of some important relationships. How will you work to restore civility and rebuild relationships with all constituents, even when they may disagree with your views?
Yeah, sorry, just checking if I'm unmuted. It's so important to bring people together, and the situation is so incongruent to who we are as a town and what we've all on this Zoom session have acknowledged about our town being so full of wonderful, caring people. It's quite hard to understand why this should have happened, but we must bring people together. And I think it begins from the top with modeling respectful and responsive governance at town meetings and not dismissing what residents and major institutions are saying, being welcoming to people at the podium. We could perhaps start by having listening sessions with residents. We can have surveys to assess the sense of welcoming and their ideas on what we can do better. And we should keep in regular touch with stakeholders such as the schools and the library, and fostering collaboration and good relationships when there aren't necessarily issues to discuss. I know that having worked with the school district for over 10 years and even more as PTA president, I know that the school district is immediately amenable to having good relationships. And this can happen overnight if people just reach out in a productive and constructive way. It's really important to listen even when you think you know something. You might have an idea of how an organization works, but if you don't talk to that organization, you really won't know. So listening and collaboration is key.
Thank you. Ms. Bounds?
I agree that the tone comes from the top and that I'm really happy to be running with Holly McCall and Lori Morton and Mike Weinberg, because we listen to each other. We have different strengths. We have different areas in our professional life that we work with, and we bring different viewpoints, and we can sit and discuss them, and together we come up with a better answer than we would alone. We've worked across different fields and work with different elected officials to get different projects done up until this point. And I think that going forward, we need to listen to all the stakeholders and create a positive feedback loop. We might not always agree, and we might not necessarily go with your idea this time or my idea next time, but we move forward as a community and we move to the next step, and we use that feedback to inform the next step of the process. So I think with anything you do, you set out with this ideal of where you want to go, and you adjust that over time with the reality of the situation, because it never quite lives up to the ideal, but we always want to keep making it closer and closer to perfect. And I think as long as we all have that goal and we understand that we're going to move together as a community, we can get there.
Okay. Ms. Tip. Oh, I'm sorry. Once again, I got off course here. Okay, thank you. The next question, first to Ms. Bounds. A number of questions on a range of environmental topics were submitted. What are important issues to you that fall under the environmental umbrella that you would want to take action on if elected?
I think that's a great question. And I think that on a personal and a municipal level, we can do a lot to impact climate change. It's the whole idea of taking these big democratic ideals, the big global issues, and making them happen and get implemented on a local level. Of course, the West End is a deeply important environmental ecosystem, and we want to preserve the wetlands and put an overlay district to really conserve what we have there. Again, I really love this idea of reclaiming some of the natural spaces that we have to make them more accessible and make them more eco-friendly, to make them better carbon sinks and put them on the pollinator pathway. I love the green building codes and the stretch codes that we've developed, and the 19,000 tons of carbon we saved by making a switch to green energy. Like, you can make big impact on a local level if you just really focus on getting little bits of it done each time, and making steady, constant improvement. You can make a big impact in a local community, on a municipal and a personal level.
Okay.
We all need to do our part.
Ms. Tip.
Yes, thank you for that question. I care very much about issues of sustainability and conservation. And aside from the schools, I moved to this town for the beautiful open spaces, and it would be a priority to support and protect these and the sensitive ecosystems that we have. Our town does very well on this, and I would support this work and work on continued progress. I support the goals of the historic 2016 Paris Agreement to cut greenhouse gas emissions and hold down the rise of local global temperatures. And small municipalities like ours are an important way to contribute to this effort. And I'm glad that Newcastle adopted our local Paris Accord resolution. Perhaps we can reach out to other communities and pledge to do this work together to sort of augment what we do and sort of have an exponential reach. Newcastle is designated as a climate smart and clean energy community, and it's a wonderful commitment to reduce our carbon footprint and use renewable energy sources. And I applaud the town for adopting the New York State Stretch Energy Code. It's a voluntary program, and these efforts are really important. And I'm glad to know that we have a wonderful sustainability advisory board, and they have wonderful initiatives and goals. And I think that there's a lot that we can do together. For instance, we could reach out to the schools or maybe the PTA to create educational programs and projects for students, and who could bring information home to parents, and again, spread the word. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. Residents of Millwood and the West End often feel forgotten about. How would you make sure that the town board addresses concerns unique to those residents and includes those residents' views in town policy considerations? Ms. Tipp?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure who was getting that question.
Oh, okay.
We really have to unite our entire community, and it would be great to connect our hamlets and our residents throughout Newcastle. And we can do this by engaging residents in open dialogue, dialogue about their needs and their interests, and to ensure that we are protecting our community's open spaces and ecology through informed and inclusive decision-making. And again, inclusiveness comes from the top, and it's about a willingness to listen and reach out to different stakeholders, which I've done extensively in my work on the school district. I would work with the Millwood East End Advisory Board, which is newly convened, and also the East End, to make sure resident voices are heard and their input is factored into decision-making and needed improvements. There's no reason, absolutely none, to give less attention to certain sections of our town. Our school district, for instance, has students from Newcastle and Mount Pleasant, and we never distinguish and address their needs differently. So, and I know that no one feels neglected based on what town they live in. So there are many important infrastructure projects going on in Millwood. There are sewers, Millwood sidewalk improvement projects, pedestrian safety. There are serious concerns with the Sunshine Children's Home and the Hudson Ridge Wellness Center, and residents feel that they have not been heard. There are traffic concerns, tree clear cutting concerns, and we need to pay attention. Thank you.
Ms. Bounds?
I love Millwood. Dodds and Chico's are one of my favorite places, and my son goes to Rockies all the time. We love the new baseball field with the lights on it. And it's really one of the places that for a working parent are really ideal, because the hours that they're open are very convenient. So we run there after sporting events to pick up everything from a hashtag to chicken from Chico's. But I would really like to see more sewers and sidewalks and more effort spent on the infrastructure in Millwood, so it feels more connected to Chappaqua and the rest of Newcastle. It doesn't feel like it's an afterthought. Of course, I've spent a lot of time on Amsterdam Field for soccer games and in the West End at T-Town. And there's great conservation efforts going there, and it's just a really beautiful part of our community. And it would be great if it felt more connected to the rest of town, so that we feel like we're more like one community, and we really take advantage of the parks and recreation that we have in the West End, as well as the great shops and community that we find in Millwood. So I think that just comes from reaching out and finding out what their needs are and how we can further connect with those communities or those parts of our community, so that we feel like we're one Newcastle.
Okay, thank you. The next question first to Ms. Bounds. How have you educated yourself about the form-based code, and what are your views on the process that has gotten us to this point?
Well, like everyone else, I think I've spent a lot of time both at board meetings and watching them on YouTube when I couldn't attend in person. I've read thousands of pages of red line documents to figure out what is going on and what a form-based code is. And I found that the presentation yesterday really helpful, where they said a form-based code really just makes the process of getting a building permit more predictable and easier to administer than use or function-based zoning. And I think that as an investor, you really want to know what your risks are and what the downside might be. And so I really like this idea of predictable, easier to understand building processes, because I know that our current process allows investors or forces investors to sometimes get caught up in red tape, and it takes a very long time and it's very opaque, and you don't really know if you'll end up with a building permit at the end of it. And so I think anything we can do to clarify the process will give investors an incentive to develop the spaces in our town, particularly the 7.75 acres on North Greeley that desperately needs it. And I support no expansion beyond the 7.75 acres until we understand what happens when that's really open. So we need to understand what happens on an environmental impact, what happens in terms of affordable housing, what happens in terms of traffic, what happens in terms of all of the real world things that happen there.
Thank you. Ms. Chip?
Yes, thank you. I've read everything that there was to read based on my role on the school board. And I do believe that the form-based code is, it's an unfortunate failure of visioning and planning. And there are a lot of inconvenient truths here. This is not a plan because developer profitability is not a plan. The code focuses on luxury rentals, and there's been no analysis for where civic, cultural, gathering, and retail spaces will be. And that's what creates vibrancy. It's been a failure in terms of visioning on revitalization. The town still doesn't know the retail areas, and they were discussing this at a recent meeting, and they're essentially building the airplane as they fly on the eve of implementation. There's a failure on housing diversity as well. The FGEIS requires only 10% affordable housing and no workforce or senior housing. The town is now figuring out workforce housing right before implementation with no adequate analysis, but there's still no senior housing. And this does not prevent a segregated affordable housing building, which I'm concerned about. Our schools, unfortunately, were thrown under the bus. There's been a gross underreporting of pupil expenses and a potential $4 million shortfall. It's a recipe to raise taxes and cut programs. And there's been a failure of respect for our community. We were left out of the planning process for a transformational project rolled out under the cover of COVID. Vibrant towns around us succeed without.
Thank you. Time's up, Ms. Chip. And Ms. Bounds, I just want to clarify, you're requesting your first rebuttal?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so so for the timekeeper in the audience, Ms. Bounds is getting the first of her 30-second rebuttals.
Well, as is mentioned, the legislation hasn't been written yet, and so we still can talk about workforce housing and affordable housing and ways to get all of those things in the budget that we want. The other thing is that even with all of the people that moved to Newcastle during COVID and 91 Bedford and the new houses, we saw an impact of one new student in our school district. Even for the additional student enrollment figures for the full build out on 72 acres, we talked about 200 extra students. So if there's 10% of that.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Tip, you're requesting the first of your 30-second rebuttals, correct?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, this is a perfect illustration of what happens when you don't collaborate and speak to people and just reach out. And so I'm concerned by this tendency that I see continued here. The school district enrollment is a tricky thing. And even though you might see what Jennifer just mentioned, there's been a decrease at the high school, but an increase in the early grades in the elementary schools. We just had a large graduating class, and that reduced the number of students at Greeley, but the number of students at Grafflin and Roaring Brook have increased, and that is your projection for the future.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The next question will go first to Ms. Tip, and I'd like to remind the candidates to please be aware of the time. Do you believe that the form-based code is the, excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you believe that the form-based code is the best way to achieve the goals and objectives of the town's comprehensive plan? If elected, what actions would you advocate taking to revitalize downtown or to address housing or zoning issues in the town of Newcastle? Ms. Tipp.
Yes, no, it is not the best way to achieve the goals of the comprehensive plan, which stated that we must maintain the bucolic character of our town. A form-based code is wrong for our town. Vibrant towns like Armonk, Katona, Pleasantville, or Cold Spring have developed successfully without a form-based code. These codes are, you find that in places like Port Chester and New Rochelle, which are fine towns, but they're much larger and denser environments. The Newcastle slate is committed to bringing vibrancy and a mix of housing options and diversity to our town. And we can do this with current zoning to control growth. And the way to do that is to first lift the 3-year moratorium on building permits that has artificially put us back. We can have overlay zones and special permits that would give us leverage to negotiate with developers so we can actually plan the kind of development we want to see. And to get what we want, we can work with the planning board and use the acceptable portions of the FGEIS to streamline the process. And this is how you leverage negotiations with developers. And we must include all stakeholders. So the code removes all leverage. So we can actually plan the kind of development we want to see. We can look at town-owned properties for civic, entertainment, and gathering spaces that give people a reason to gather downtown and populate retail stores. Pleasantville did this with Jacob Burns. This is a collaborative process with experts in the field. And yes, you can do this, and we can do this together if you vote for the Unite Newcastle slate.
Okay, Ms. Bounds.
So I support the current direction of the form-based code. I think that the stretch of North Greeley that has really needs development now. And this is the plan that we have that will give incentives to develop the Rite Aid space, the Bistro Maxine's, all of those spaces that would really bring vibrancy to our community. Apartments bring housing diversity to towns. They bring economic diversity to towns. They bring feet on the street that are the people that are going to shop at your businesses to town. And that stretch is in need of immediate revitalization. We spent a lot of time and had a lot of public engagement sessions and comments to get to this point. And I think we're really ready to move forward and bring that revitalization to the 7.75 acres of North Greeley that's so desperately needed. Again, I don't support any expansion beyond that until we see how the legislation plays out in real life. We can make all the projections that we want, but we don't know what will happen until we move forward and do it. And if we see that it brings us the diversity, the feet on the street, and the businesses that we want to see, then we can talk about having robust public engagement sessions facilitated by professionals before we expand it and write the code for the rest of the areas. So yes, I do think that we need to move forward at this point and apply the zoning legislation to the form-based district of North Greeley.
Thank you. And Ms. Tipp, you're requesting your second rebuttal?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Your third, this is your second and final 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a fallacy that there's a limit to North Greeley because with a simple majority of the town board, they can expand this code. How would you measure the test case of North Greeley? What are the benchmarks for success? It's a flat topography, which is different from the King Street Hill or the busy area of South Greeley. So you cannot plan and understand how to implement the code by looking at what developers build on North Greeley. It's a completely different area from the rest of the areas of the town, and no one understands the benchmarks for success.
Thank you. Okay, the next question will go first to Ms. Bounds. How do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted Newcastle? Do you think we know yet the full scope of the challenges and opportunities that have resulted? If elected, how would you navigate policy decisions in light of these impacts?
Well, I think one of the most immediate impacts of COVID-19 is that people are really engaged into what's going on in our town. I think we've seen it for better or for worse. Like, people are really commenting on a lot of these public engagement sessions. They're getting involved with parks and local, very hyper local issues because we're focusing on what's going on right here. I don't think that you can ever really understand the situation that you're in while you're in it, but you can always evaluate the best course going forward and make some good judgments and just move forward with the best information that you have. And so I think that that's what we need to do as a town, is to evaluate the situation we're in, take the best information we have and move forward to solve some long-term problems that we've had here. We need to solve long-term problems in terms of equity and inclusion. We need to solve long-term problems in terms of walkability. We need to solve long-term problems in terms of conservation and sustainability. And of course, long-term problems in terms of our housing equity and businesses and feet on the street. And so we need to take the best information we have and come up with a plan and move forward to find a path out of the new Newcastle after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Ms. Tip.
Yes, there are many pandemic unknowns. Moving patterns have changed. A lot of new families have moved to the district. There have been a lot of real estate sales, and it's been wonderful to meet new families all over town. There are changes in commuting patterns. People are working at home, and there are impacts on our traffic, and there are impacts on retail. People are doing a lot of online shopping, and we don't know how this will affect our stores. We're very dependent on the New York City metro area economy, and our commuting and local economy will be affected by what happens to the city economy. So we have to be very flexible and adaptable to change, to take advantage of new innovations that might come to pass that we could apply to changing situations. That's why it's a very bad idea to be straitjacketed by a rigid form-based code, because once that code is set and passed, developers can build as of right. So the code could eventually produce obsolete buildings, and the world is changing very quickly. And we have to leave ourselves open to make changes in the future, and especially in building designs. I've had a lot of experience with innovative designs in our schools when we passed our bond to create innovative learning spaces, such as Google-related spaces. And I know how to plan for innovation in spaces. We first consulted experts and in the field, and we consulted our teachers to see what their goals were before planning physical changes.
Okay, thank you. We have one final question, and this final question will go first to Ms. Tip, and after this question, we will have our closing statements. So Ms. Tip, starting with Ms. Tip, if elected, how will you help bring the community together after the divisiveness of form-based code considerations? Do you believe there are still decisions to be made that will allow all residents to feel like their voices have been heard?
I'm sorry, I would like to ask you to repeat the question, and
Sure.
I'm just wondering if
Sure, I'll repeat it.
we've had that question already, but maybe.
I'll repeat the question.
Sorry to ask. No. Okay.
If elected, how will you help bring the community together after the divisiveness of form-based code considerations? Do you believe there are still decisions to be made that will allow all residents to feel like their voices have been heard?
Yeah, again, it's about bringing people together. And how we do that is from the top by modeling respectful behavior, being out and about and talking to people. And I would think that we could structure and plan for listening sessions with residents. We could make them on specific topics that people are interested in, or have open sessions. I think we have to reach out to our, what we've called our interested agencies in the form-based code process. The town has to reach out with the schools. We could perhaps have some meetings. I think that it's very important to listen because 5 members of the town board can't possibly know everything. And so we have to take advantage of the expertise and willingness to community-minded people of this town who are so smart and so engaged, and we can get a lot of ideas from them. I think that it's really time to have a change from the top. I felt that residents have felt unwelcome in our town government, unwelcome to speak. And I've, in my discussions with people around town, I've learned that a lot of them are afraid to say what they think. They're afraid even to engage on social media, and they would never come to a town board meeting because they're worried about being bullied. There is no reason for this to happen in our town, which is a town of wonderful people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bounds?
Well, some of the greatest things about Newcastle is that we're a very opinionated group when we have a lot of strong ideas about how we can make the town better. And I think what really matters is that we are all focused on making Newcastle better. And I really believe that that underlying the divisiveness, that's our common goal, our shared goal. Some of the best conversations I've had with people have been my walk to the train down Douglas or on the lacrosse field, or when I'm dropping off the chicken dip for the football dinner, or pulling vines at Jean Craighead George Park. And I think in addition to having a top-down approach, you need to have a bottom-up approach, and you need to talk to people who might not normally be in your circle. They might not be on your football team, they might not have kids in the same grade, but they might have the same conservation efforts, and so or same conservation interests, and you're aligned there. So you take that one point of alignment and you have a conversation when you're pulling invasive porcelain berry out of some trees, and it leads to talk of policies for making an all-electric fleet for the town and how we can come up with a 5-year capital plan. And I think once we do that, and once we realize that our common goals are the same, we can move forward and we can move beyond the divisiveness that we've seen with the form-based code. And I truly believe that everyone who spent all of this time working to run this race or in their community efforts really do want to make this a better place for all of Newcastle. And that's what we have to focus on.
All right, thank you. So now we will have each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. And first, Ms. Bounds.
Hi, thank you again for spending your evening with us and letting us talk about some of the complicated issues that have come up across Newcastle. I'm asking for your vote for the unexpired term so that I can further dig into the issues that concern all of us. We didn't talk about the airport, but I would like to work on reducing the airport noise and pollution. I'd love a sidewalk down Douglas, Soares and Millwood, increase conservation standards on the West End and all over Newcastle, and just really the opportunity to represent you and connect people in spaces and really build the community that we all love and make it better. And so I'm asking for your vote so that we can, and I'm asking you to vote row A all the way so that we can work better to make Newcastle better for everyone who lives here. I think we all have those same aligned goals, and we can move forward and make it a more positive place to be. Thank you for your time. And thank you again to the League for hosting.
Okay, Ms. Chick, your 1-minute closing statement.
I want to thank the League and my fellow candidates and all the listeners here tonight. I want to bring progress and revitalization to our town and create robust and vibrant commercial spaces for a diverse and multi-generational community, while at the same time preserving the natural beauty and open spaces of our hamlets. Towns around us have done this without a form-based code. We must stay flexible, innovative, and navigate an ever-changing world. We cannot straitjacket ourselves with a one-size-fits-all form-based code that blocks progress and innovation. We are better than that. I value a strong democracy and representative responsive governance, and I want to bring positive change by building an inclusive and respectful climate that values a diversity of voices and opinions. And I commit to being open to learning, allowing voices to be heard, engaging in respectful conversations, being equity focused, and building trust and a positive climate. So please vote for the entire Unite Newcastle slate on the last row, row G, and remember, vote the last line, to keep Newcastle first.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, I want to thank the candidates and the audience, and especially our timekeeper, Mary Kirsch. I also want to remind everyone of the unique and important role played by the League of Women Voters here in the community and all across the country. The League of Women Voters works registering voters, educating voters on the issues of the day, and protecting their right to vote, which is vital to the strength of our democracy. Your local league is made up of volunteers who devote their time and energy. Your participation and assistance is always welcome, and your financial contributions would be appreciated. So remember, the league's slogan, which is democracy is not a spectator, excuse me, democracy is not a spectator sport. I encourage everyone to vote. If you wish to vote early, again, early voting, and the League of Women Voters was a vocal supporter of early voting in New York State. Early voting begins Saturday, October 23rd, and runs through Sunday, October 31st. You can vote at any of the early voting locations in Westchester County. If you don't know where to vote early, the hours and locations are to be found at the website citizenparticipation.westchestergov.com. Thank you all again and have a wonderful evening.